you. It's good to see you. No. Stay seated. Even at home, stay seated. I'm just joking. So, well, welcome all of you watching campuses at home, Jackson Hole, my new home away from home. Anyway, Debbie and I just can't stay away any longer. So, and when you be able to get back into worship, into corporate worship, it's just phenomenal, isn't it? And we were at the racetrack last night, 2,000 cars, and so it was fantastic. So welcome to all the campuses and everyone at this campus. Let me just give you a little bit of the schedule coming up so you'll know. Next weekend is our global weekend. It's when we have all of the worship pastors in from other countries. Remember how they all sing in their own language, and we just sense the presence of God. And then we have an incredible presentation, our best presentation ever for you about what we're doing around the world. There's so much going on. I've kind of been convicted on sabbatical that you don't really know what all you're doing around the world. For instance, we're rebuilding churches in Syria that ISIS tore down, but you're doing that. So you don't want to miss next weekend. So we're going to let you know what's going on globally next weekend. The next weekend, I'll be back. By the way, next weekend, when it's global weekend, I'll be in Washington, D.C. With governmental leaders, but mainly with spiritual leaders. Franklin Graham, at his invitation, he's doing a prayer march. So I'll help kick that prayer march off at the Lincoln Memorial with the president, and we'll send people out to pray for our country. So I'll be there next weekend. The following weekend, October 3rd and 4th, I'll be back, and it's our 20-year anniversary celebration. So our 20-year anniversary was in April, but because of COVID, we couldn't do it. So we'll be doing it the first weekend I'm back. You don't want to miss that. Also that weekend, we're going to start childcare back for 5 and under. So some of you, the mothers can say, thank God. So anyway, so I was about to make a joke, and then I thought through it, and I thought, nope, that wouldn't. I was going to say, I see, never mind. All right, so, but I know the moms need relief. So 5 and under, though, childcare will start back October 3rd and 4th, and then next week I'll begin a new series. Actually, I'll begin the new series of 2 after that, because that next week, my message is what I did on my summer vacation. So I'm going to give you a report about what God did in my heart on sabbatical and how he renewed my call to Gateway Church. And I'm very, very excited about that. So anyway, so that's the next few weeks, and we love you. And if you want to come, if you feel comfortable coming back in person, please come back. We're adding services to the campuses where we need to add services. We're putting time in between to disinfect every chair, every doorknob. If you don't feel comfortable to come back, we understand. Please continue to watch online. But there's something about being in the presence of God with the people of God. And so I'm glad we're getting to start meeting again. So I'm going to get to hear the word with you. So please welcome my favorite preacher, Pastor Josh Morris.
All right. Well, we are continuing our series, Survival Guide for the Soul, and we've been talking about the fruits of the Spirit, and we'll continue that today, and we'll continue going through that. There was a woman who was telling her friend that she was very down, and she didn't feel very happy in her life, and she wanted to be happy again. And her friend said, I've always thought that you look much younger than your actual age. And so if you want to feel better about yourself, what you should do is you should go around and you should ask people, how old do you look? And when they tell you that you look so young, and then you tell them your real age, they'll be shocked and you'll feel better about yourself and you'll have the happiness that you want in your life. And so that day she went to a store. She asked the clerk at the store, how old do you think I am? And he looked at her and he said, well, I think you're about 35 years old. And she said, well, I'm actually 47. And he said, wow, that's incredible. Okay, well, way to go. And she said, that did make me feel good. That was really nice. And so then she went to McDonald's and she walked up to the front of the line. She said to the cashier, how old do you think I am? And he said, I think you're I don't know, 29? She said, wow, yeah, I'm 47. He said, wow, that's incredible. And so she felt better about herself even more. And then she left there and she went to the bus stop. And there was a very elderly man there waiting at the bus stop. No one else was there. She said, I'm gonna try it again. She said, sir, how old do you think I am? And he said, well, I do have a way of telling the exact age of women. And if you want, I could try it on you. And she said, okay, sure, go ahead. And he said, well, I have to kiss you first. And she said, well, really? And he said, yeah, if I kiss you, then I'll know your age exactly. She said, exactly? And he said, exactly. And so she said, well, there's no one around to give this a try, you know? She gave him a little kiss, and he said, I think you are 47 years old. She said, incredible, that's amazing. How did you guess my age? And he said, well, I was just behind you in line at McDonald's just a minute ago. We will do crazy things for happiness sometimes. And today we're talking about joy. We're seeking joy so often in our lives, but happiness and joy are two very different things. Seeking happiness, as we will see, causes corruption in our lives and dissatisfaction. But seeking the joy of the Lord comes from a place of innocence. Seeking the joy of the Lord impacts us in unbelievable ways. And so we've been talking about the fruits of the Spirit, and we'll look at it once more. Galatians chapter 5, starting in verse 22, it says, but the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, that's what we're talking about today, peace, forbearance, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. So today we're talking about joy, and in this time I'm going to give you a little bit of an update of what's been going on in our lives. My wife Hannah is here, and we, along with our two kids, about 2 years ago moved to Austin to start a church. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that in just a moment. But now, today, we live in Amarillo. We just moved just about a month ago, or a month and a half ago. And you know, we love it. And I'll explain a little bit about the journey that brought us to that place. But we love Amarillo. Hannah grew up in Amarillo. We have lots of friends and family there. We love being there. People from Dallas often say, like, well, there's not that much to do in Amarillo. And I get that. We took our kids to the theme park that they have in Amarillo, and they have this roller coaster, and it is very small, and it is a very short ride. There's nothing spectacular about it. But the guy that runs the roller coaster, he was hilarious. He was like, come on, come forward, don't raise your hands in the air because of the possible risk of dismemberment or decapitation, and move forward, go into the roller coaster. And I was like, this guy is hilarious. I like him so much. But I don't think he was joking at all. Like, he was dead serious. And there was nothing on this ride. You couldn't get hurt. If you fell off of it, you'd be like, oh, I got a scratch. Like, it wouldn't be that bad, you know? This was a very, like, simple ride. And so then we're about to get on the cart, and me and Grady went ahead because there was only room for 2 more people on that ride, and then Hannah and Willow stayed behind. And I'm about to get on the cart, and he says, for real, he says, now, if the roller coaster stops at any point, if you guys could in unison rock back and forth, that will make it go forward again. And I was loving it. I was like, that's hilarious. You're so funny. And he didn't laugh or smile at all. And so we got on the roller coaster. We went around, and it was great. And then Hannah and my daughter Willow got onto the roller coaster, and it stopped like halfway through. It just completely stopped. And he goes, yeah, I'm gonna need you to rock back and forth now. I was like, he was serious, he was dead serious. And so they all like 1, 2, 3, and then they would lurch forward, and it would move just a little bit, and they all had to work together to make this ride work. That's how bad it was. But in Amarillo, even though there's not that much to do, there's a quality of people. We've had just moved into a house, and we've had to do some painting and stuff like that. And the workers there, their name matters. The contractors, they take that seriously. They hold a high level of pride over the work that they do. And that's been incredible to see. In fact, on the flight over here, yesterday we were flying in, and we got on the flight, and 2 gentlemen sat down in the 2 seats in front of me. And I could tell that they had never met each other, and they didn't know each other. They just sat down in the seat and started up a conversation. I put my headphones in. I was gonna listen to some music for the flight. It's only about a 12-minute flight, so I just listened to like 2 songs. And then we started the descent, and I took my headphones out, and they were buying and selling cattle. They just met each other on the plane. And I will never forget this moment, because you don't hear people introduce themselves this way anymore, but they decided they're gonna do this deal and they're gonna exchange information. And so the guy goes, "Mark Sybil is the name," and he reaches his hand out. And I was like, you never hear anyone introduce themselves. I don't walk around going, "Josh Morse is the name," you know? And this was totally normal. He was like, "John Chesterton, pleasure to meet you," you know? And they did a deal right there. It was so great that we got to witness that. But we love it. We love being around the people there. We love being around our family that is there. And so we love it. We love being there. And so we're going to talk about joy, and I'm going to give you a little bit of an update of how we found ourselves in this position. We started off on Saturday nights, and we were meeting at a Methodist church. And it was rough going. It was Saturday nights were a hard sell for people in that area to go to church. But we were saving a lot of money, and we didn't have to buy toys for the nursery and all those things. And so we had services for a year on Saturday nights. And things were going fairly well, but we really needed some more momentum in order to be able to sustain the church. Desperately needed more momentum. And so we started looking around for a place where we could meet on Sundays. I started talking to other pastors in the area. Some pastors had churches that were large in the area and said, we tried for a little while to do Saturday nights and no one would come. And so we stopped it. So I said, okay, we really need to move to Sunday mornings. And we took a big risk. We put a lot of money into trailers and equipment and kids' supplies and toys and all those things. And it was a gamble. We really thought it's important that we move to Sunday mornings and that we take this risk. And so we put all this money and invested all this money into being able to have services on Sunday morning. We found a university where we could meet, and we went for it. We went all in on that plan. And it was only 4 weeks after that COVID hit. And all of a sudden, everything that was our cushion in order to continue to keep paying staff and to keep paying the rent and the things that we had to do, all of that had been placed into this big bet of ours of all meeting in person, and Austin shut down completely. There's still plenty of churches, friends that I have that are pastoring there, that are still not meeting in person in any capacity at all. And so just 4 weeks into this big move, it really hurt us drastically. And so I was fearful. I was terrified that the church was going to shut down. I was scared of what would happen. And 1 week, I had recorded the message that I preached, and we would watch it as a family on Sundays together. And then we also produced, Tyler Bates, who's here tonight, Tyler and Connie would produce a kids video. And so we would watch that with our kids. And they do a great job. Those videos are fun and hilarious, and our kids love them. But they're also impactful too. The messages were so good. And so I'm watching this video, and Tyler is preaching, and he's talking about the time that Paul gets on the ship, and they shipwreck. And even in the middle of the shipwreck, then they swim over to an island, and they're making a fire to warm up, and he gets bitten by a snake. And everyone thinks he's cursed, like your ship got wrecked and then you were bitten by a snake, and everyone dies that gets bitten by this snake. And after a little while, there are no ill effects on Paul. And so Tyler's telling this story, and he says this thing that stuck out to me so much. He said, the enemy will continue to fire darts that are what if darts. What if this happens? What if this happens? What if it goes down like this? What if your worst fears come true? And you'll start to feel all of this worry because of the darts that are being fired at you that say, what if? And he said, but Paul had a better saying. It was even if we get shipwrecked, God will still get me to my destination. Even if I get snake bitten, God will still get me to my destination. And when he said that, I realized that I was feeding anxiety to myself by constantly sitting there saying, what if? So the first thing that we should remember today to find our joy is to learn to say, even if. Anxiety says, what if? But faith says, even if my worst fears come true. And as he was preaching, I was remembering the passage in Daniel chapter 3 with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And it starts in verse 16. It says, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to him, King Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it. And he will deliver us from your majesty's hand. But even if he does not, we want you to know, your majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up. Maybe no one is threatening to throw you in a fiery furnace today, but you have something that you've been in fear of or worried about, or something that you've been laying at the feet of God, asking him for, or something that you've been dreading that could possibly come up. And over we can say, well, what if that really does happen? What if that really does take place? And it takes so much more faith to say, even if my worst fears come true, I will still serve God. Even if the thing that scares me to death happens, I will still serve God. The second thing that we need in order to keep our joy is to maintain your innocence. Maintain your innocence. Now, I was in Austin. We were having a pretty difficult time, and my friend Rishi Bhaskaran was in town, and we went to dinner, and he said, I'm doing a study, a deep dive on innocence. And so I said, well, tell me more. And he taught me all the things that he was reading and all the things that he was studying. And that was when I realized that joy comes from innocence. I kept thinking about it in the terms of Jesus told us to be like little children. And all of that makes so much sense when you start to look at the joy of a little child. The innocence of a child causes there to be such joy. And once the weight and the pressures of life step in our lives, that's when things start to get heavy. That's when we lose our joy. And so then I started studying. I started reading everything that I could find in the scriptures about this. And I came to 1 Samuel chapter 16, starting in verse 6. Let's read this. When they arrived, Samuel saw Eliab and thought, surely the Lord's anointed stands here before the Lord. Samuel was looking for a king for Israel. And the Lord said to Samuel, do not consider his appearance or his height, for I have rejected him. The Lord does not look at the things people look at. People look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. And then Jesse called Abinadab and had him pass in front of Samuel, but Samuel said, the Lord has not chosen this one either. Jesse then had Shammah pass by, but Samuel said, nor has the Lord chosen this one. Jesse had 7 of his sons pass before Samuel, but Samuel said to him, the Lord has not chosen these. So he asked Jesse, are these all the sons you have? There is still the youngest, Jesse answered. He is tending the sheep. Samuel said, send for him. We will not sit down until he arrives. So he sent for him and had him brought in. He was glowing with health and had a fine appearance and handsome features. Then the Lord said, rise and anoint him. This is the one. So Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the presence of his brothers. And from that day on, the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon David. And Samuel then went to Ramah. Okay, now, You might remember this journey of David. We first need to point out, though, that when Samuel was looking for the next king, he had already prophesied that Saul would lose his position and that there would be a new king. And so he's looking for David, and David is out in the fields working. This is a symbol of keeping his head down and doing what he's been called to do. Not standing there in that line, trying to look like the right person to be picked, not manipulating the situation, but being pure and innocent and doing the work that he has called him to do. And so then he gets chosen to be the king. And you might remember that Saul was at different times trying to kill David. He was jealous of David. He was trying to kill him. And you see and remember the corruption of Saul and the tragedy of the way that it ended with Saul. What you might not remember, though, is that Saul started off in much the same way that David did. Pure in that sense. In fact, whenever he was chosen to be king, Saul was hiding in the closet with all the bags. And the Bible says that even still, he was head and shoulders taller than everyone else and incredibly handsome. He probably had a beard much like this one, incredibly handsome. I'll admit, I sometimes, if I'm trying to look smart, I do this a little bit. I think that that's gonna work. But I'm convinced now that the beard says one major thing about me. I'm comfortable wearing pajamas anywhere. It's like, I don't care about my appearance at all. That's the thing that I figured out that it actually says about me. So yeah, that's how it works for me. The point here, though, is that what he is saying is that Saul started off in this pure state. He had been made king, and then they found him plowing his own field. Whenever they defeated the Ammonites, they wanted to kill the people who said Saul wasn't qualified, but he stopped them and said, no, we won't do that. Today is the Lord's day. But then over time, the power, the need for more caused corruption in his heart. Innocence requires a commitment to stay that way. It requires that you do not allow your heart to become corrupt. And the opposite of being innocent is being corrupt. And innocence is also the perfect response to corruption. And so Samuel goes to find a new king, and he sees Eliab, which is Jesse's son, and he sees how tall and handsome he is, and he thinks this must be the guy. But it wasn't. It says there in that passage that man looks at the outward appearance, but God looks at the heart. What is God looking for? One of those things that God is looking for is innocence. We need an innocence in our lives, one that causes us to walk innocently into our lives so that we can experience the joy of the Lord. People believe that the only way to get what they really want in life is to move forward through manipulation, and manipulation is a form of corruption. Innocence says God will take care of everything that needs to be taken care of. God can take care of anyone. Innocence knows that God is bigger than whatever you can try to accomplish for yourself. David was hiding in a cave from Saul, and he had multiple opportunities to kill Saul. And when he chose not to, he was maintaining his innocence. David was a joyful person. We see him often singing in the fields and dancing to God. He had this joy, but over time, David as well was corrupt. And it was when he saw Bathsheba and he decided to get what he wanted that he lost his innocence. That corruption came into his life and the joy was lost. And you see the tragic effects of that one choice that goes not only on David, but the rest of his family as well. We have to stay innocent. We have to be able to find the innocence and be content to leave everything else in God's hand. And when we don't have joy, it's because we're corrupt in some area of our lives. I'm gonna read to you a quote. It's one of my favorite quotes that I've ever seen or come across. And it's from G.K. Chesterton. I believe it's in Orthodoxy, but it says, because children have abounding vitality, because they are in spirit fierce and free. Therefore, they want things repeated and unchanged. They always say, do it again, and the grown-up person does it again until he is nearly dead. For grown-up people are not strong enough to exult in monotony. But perhaps God is strong enough to exult in monotony. It is possible that God says every morning, do it again to the sun, and every evening, do it again to the moon. It may not be automatic necessity that makes all daisies alike. Listen to this. It may be that God makes every daisy separately, but has never got tired of making them. It may be that he has the eternal appetite of infancy. For we have sinned and grown old, and our Father is now younger than we are. It is that eternal appetite for infancy that causes us to feel an overwhelming joy and peace. It is that appetite for infancy that God has. And this quote from Chesterton says that the way that we have lost it is through sin. That our sin has caused us to grow older. For the people who are Lord of the Rings fans, is his name Gollum, the one that likes the ring? Is it Smeagol or Gollum? It used to be Smeagol and then it was Gollum, and he loves that ring. Okay, if you go back and you look, he was actually, you know the way that he looks. You've seen the movie or you've read it described in the books. You know the way that he looks. When you go back into his previous life, he was actually a normal hobbit. And it was the sin, the desire to get what he wanted and have the power that he wanted and the control that he wanted that degraded him into what he was that we've seen in the book or the movie. It's that holding on to something and saying, I need this, and doing everything that we can to try to work our way into it and get it for ourselves. And when we do that, we have corruption in our lives. And so the way that it looks for me in that sense then is I started praying that God would restore my innocence. And so I would drive home to my house after work, and I would often remember what it was like when we first moved into that house. How excited we were, how thrilled we were, how grateful we were. And I would recall all of those feelings and those memories, and I would say, God, don't let me get comfortable with doing the same thing over and over every day. Restore my innocence. I would think about it with my marriage. I would go back to those days where I would be so excited to go on a date with my wife whenever I met her, and I would be so anticipating those times that we would have together. And then all of a sudden, you don't realize the corruption that builds into your life over time, where you get busy with work and the kids and school and everything else that's going on. And so I started just praying, God, restore my innocence. Restore my innocence for my marriage. Let me be as joyful and happy as I was on the first day that we got married. Restore my innocence for this marriage. And then I started thinking about everything that I had in my life. I would start to think about the moments that I could think back of, special moments of spending time with my kids, and over I'd say, God, restore my innocence. Restore my innocence. And while I was stressed out about what was happening with the church, and I was trying so hard to make things work and to put things where they were supposed to be and do everything that I could to make all of this work, if I just stopped for just a moment and said, God, restore my innocence, my joy would come back. It isn't chasing happiness. It isn't looking for the next thing that will please us, the next thing that will give us this feeling of happiness. All of that searching is corruption. All of that searching of finding the next pleasure in life, finding the next thing. If I could just have this, if I could just have this job, this car, this house, if I could just have these things, then I would be happy. And it can never bring fulfillment because it has now become an idol in your life. And instead we say, God, just restore my joy. I just want to be in the presence of you, and I want my joy to return for everything that you have given me. I want to feel that joy once again. And so after a while, we kept continuing to do the videos for the service, but giving was impacted. Our ability to continue to go was getting slimmer and slimmer by the day. And the joy was zapped out of my life. I was constantly thinking about what if? What if this really does close down? What if this does happen? What if this is the way that it goes? And I was overwhelmed with that type of stress and anxiety, and I could not get myself to find God's joy again. And even if, it did come to that. It came to the day where we had to say, it's time to close the doors. It's time to say that we're not able to do this anymore. It was the hardest thing that I've ever done in my life. I decided that for everybody that I possibly could that was in the church, I would call all of them personally and I would tell them these things. I would tell them what was going on. And every call and every conversation was extremely emotional and difficult. I preached to the church about endings and how we ought to handle endings whenever they come along in our lives. And one of the things that I read about whenever I was researching it is that endings are so much more truthful than beginnings. In the beginnings, we have our high hopes for all the things that could be, the things that it might turn out to be, all of these things, and we place our high hopes on all of these things, and we long for those things. And so we have our high hopes in the beginning, but at the end, it's truthful because we see what work was actually done. We see what was done. It's also truthful because, as I learned, people will tell you what they really thought whenever something is ending. And it was so painful. And I thought, God, I don't know what's going on. I don't know what we're going to do. I don't know why you would call me to do this. I don't know why you would ask me to come and to move my family and to go through this. We had difficulty with our kids in schooling. We had trouble adapting. We had all of these things that we were going through. And for it the timing to be so poor, for it to hit us at the very worst time that it possibly could have hit. And over, I was just saying, why, God, why are you putting me through this? And then I remember so clearly God saying, why did you do this in the first place? I said, well, because I believe that you asked me to. And God said, well, then will you do what I'm asking you to do now? And immediately I remembered that message. Paul could have easily said, why, God, did you ask me to get on this ship if you knew that it was going to shipwreck? Why, God, did you ask me to go through all of this if you knew what the ending really was? And as I prayed through all of those things, I realized and remembered that no matter where the journey takes you, you can find a joy in the innocence of following God. Without making your own agenda, without deciding what you think it's gonna be, what you think it's gonna turn into, you can just give your all to God and you can find a joy in that innocence. And so we felt like God said, well, this time you get to choose. You can choose anywhere that you want to go. We felt like God out of nowhere called us to move to Austin and to start the church. And we felt like God said this time, you can go anywhere that you want to go. And as we talked about what we wanted for our family, we had spent 16 years here in Dallas with my side of the family. The closeness that we wanted with Hannah's side of the family, we said, this is what we want to do. We want to move to Amarillo. And so we believe that we had made that decision. We believe that God allowed us to be able to make the decision on where we wanted to go next. And when we got there, I found out that through many different people, God had prophesied it long before we ever even knew the church was closing. There's a friend that we have named Molly that works there at the church where we are in Amarillo at Trinity Fellowship with Pastors Jimmy and Kim Witcher. And Molly had a dream that we would be moving there and that I was gonna come on staff at the church. And so she went to her oversight and she said, I had this dream, I don't know what to make of it. And he said, I'm certain that that's not gonna happen. This was last year. This was long before COVID ever hit. He's got a church, he's down in Austin. It's not gonna happen. Before we ever even knew what was going on, God was making a plan for us. And if I can just stop in those times and bring myself back to the innocence of following God, not expecting him to come through in a certain way, not expecting him to deliver certain things. If I can just bring myself back to that place where I say, God, I just want to serve you. Then in that innocence, we find a joy that is overwhelming, a joy that overtakes us, a joy that is profoundly deep and not dependent on the things that we have in life. Don't seek happiness. Seek the joy of resting in the presence of God. Seek the joy of the innocence of not trying to make a way or manipulate the circumstances, but instead following the voice of God no matter where it leads you. And so here I am preaching this series, and we've just moved. We just moved to Amarillo. I'm being torn in a million different directions. I'm finishing up things in Austin. I'm moving and starting a new job. We're trying to settle into our house, and we have all of this work that we need to do. And in all of that, I've had the most profound joy. In the crashing of the biggest dream that I've ever had in my life, I've found a joy that is not dependent on getting my way. I can truly say that the joy of the Lord is overflowing in our lives right now because I've finally come to the place where I've given up on getting all the things I want out of life, accomplishing all the things that I want in life, and instead finding my innocence. Your joy is killed by corruption, and it is given to you freely through your innocence. Would you bow your heads and close your eyes with me today? You can kill corruption in your life by bringing back your innocence. Maybe today you have a specific area in your life where you can sense that corruption has seeped in. Your prayer today is, God, restore my innocence. Oftentimes our desires take us over. They pull us in so many different directions. And so today we can be restored in our innocence. We can find the joy of the Lord. Maybe today you're sitting at home or at one of the campuses or here today and you say, I don't know if I've ever experienced a joy like that. I've chased happiness my whole life, but I don't know if I've ever truly experienced the joy of the Lord. You can pray a simple prayer today. You can pray a simple prayer that says, Lord, I accept you and receive you in my life. And I want your joy. I don't want to follow my own way anymore, but Lord, I want to give my ways to you. And it's as simple as that. You can pray it today. And if you feel the corruption in an area of your life, every time it rises up, pray, Lord, restore my innocence. And so God, we pray today that we would have an eternal appetite for infancy. Lord, that our sin would not cause us to grow old, and that we would see your beauty in the rising of the sun, in seeing the moon at night, that we would say with you, do it again. That we would marvel at your creation once again, that the simple things in life would give us the profound joy that you have offered us. And so, Lord, we say today, restore our innocence. Lord, we pray all these things in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
What a great word today from Pastor Josh Morris. And if you prayed that prayer, welcome to the family of God. Also, if you have a prayer request of any kind, please text your prayer request to 71010, and we would love to pray with you.
If you'd like more information about Gateway Church or just want to connect, you can text the word CONNECT to 71010. Thanks for joining us today, and we'll see you next week, either online or at any of our campuses. God bless.